We want to thank everybody for coming out for the second episode of the Life of the People show. Mr. DJ Majesty, would you please take it over, sir?
Absolutely, absolutely. We just want to appreciate everyone's time. You know, time is our most valuable asset. So I just appreciate you guys checking us out. We have some awesome professionals here today, and I'm looking forward to getting right into it and getting some information. You know, I'm here to learn as well. Without further ado, we're just gonna jump right into it. We're all over the place this evening. We have San Diego, California. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. We're in Gary, Indiana. I think we're in Texas as well. So we're broadcasting everywhere today. So let's get it started.
Definitely, definitely. And first and foremost, I want to thank my co-host, Miss Chandra and Mr. DJ Majesty. We're doing it again, and we're looking forward to doing many, many more. On today's show, we have, as DJ Majesty mentioned, we have three wonderful guests. We have Miss Stacy Dent, an educator from San Diego, California. We have Mr. Doug Williams, also an educator. I believe he's based in Texas at this point. And we have Miss Stephanie Spencer, who's a nurse practitioner based out of Gary, Indiana. So again, today's topic is going to be COVID, our community, and our children. That's more or less going to be the gist of the show and the conversation of the day. But first and foremost, we want to get to Miss Chandra and the news of the day.
Yes. So the first thing on the topic of discussion, actually the list, is the coronavirus rollout and the new stimulus money coming with the new administration. I believe it's $1,400, and that's supposed to start within the next 3 weeks, I believe.
You know,
And
that's
mhm,
also what they're saying. You know, with the whole Trump situation, they went back and forth forever and a day, and everybody knew from the get go that $600 wasn't going to be enough after people haven't gotten any support for I think it's been about 8.5 or 9 months, and then they decided to send $600. Um, that was laughable to say the least. But the sooner we can get the current administration out the door and get the new one in and get them implemented and get their feet underneath them, get these $1,400 checks out, and then hopefully they can come up with a little bit more to help the folks out there that are hurting. Because this has been 2020 is kind of carrying over to 21 for a lot of people, and so it's just important for the government to get that out there as soon as possible.
right. Um, so so what are your thoughts about, do you think Biden will push for more money with the
I
stimulus
I think he will
amount?
eventually. At the same token, I guess this is kind of, I won't say it's the Republican in me, but it's the more conservative side of it at the same time because I know that people are hurting. But at the same token, whenever we're sending out money such as this, and we're a country that's in debt, I want to say it's up to 20, I want to say 23 trillion, 24 trillion at this point in debt. And with that, every time we're doing this, I think we did 2.1 trillion, I think earlier in the year. And we just did this 1.9 trillion for the 600, or the one, I think it was 1.2 trillion. And I think the one that Biden is going to do is 1.9 trillion. And I'll say this, it's kind of funny how they pull the money out for this, but education has been hurting for so long and,
Hmm.
it's been
Right.
denied funds, but they pulled money out of their back pocket for this, but that's a different story. But at the same token, we have to still be cognizant of, our country's financials. And when you have a country like say China, for instance, who holds a good portion of America's debt, it puts us at a very vulnerable position. And so we have to be very cognizant about that. And again, understanding that people are hurting, but at the same time, we have to be cognizant of that. So if government is moving a little too slow, we can't be mad at them too much because again, at the end of the day, from a global standpoint, it puts us in a very vulnerable position. So we have to be cognizant about that. But
Right.
with that, all this craziness going on with the pandemic, then you have the stimulus issues, and then now you have these folks acting crazy last week, Chandra. What happened with that?
Man, it comes down to, you know, people believing every word that Trump, had was putting in their heads. And
Right.
so uh now those same people that have been arrested for their actions is asking for him to come and save them. So basically, at the end of the day, it has to do with what people believe in. So they believe that this man could take, you know, had that much power to, I guess, get them out of any trouble that they didn't foresee. Basically, it all comes down to power, and so they were following behind what they thought or who they thought had the most power. And come Wednesday, he will be powerless. And
Well,
I know. Go ahead.
I would say this to that, and I've said this before, that to me, and a lot of people would disagree, but I really don't believe that Donald Trump is a racist. I believe he's just a very weak individual, and when you're weak like that, you will bend in any direction that benefits you. A racist, you pretty much can kind of predict where they stand and see where they stand. Whereas a weak person, you never can kind of pigeonhole them because again, they're going to bend wherever they can to win. He found a weakness in our political system, in our political infrastructure, rather, as it pertains to a certain segment of the Republican Party. And he went after them like gangbusters. He said everything they wanted to hear. And he really got that. That's how he's able to capture them. He went after, he's a con man. He went after them. He was able to pigeonhole them and get them to really believe what he says. But at the end of the day, all he cared about was his ego and winning. Um, and he gives people just enough to where, okay, you're still going to believe me. You're still going to believe me, but not too much. And, it's funny, his fellow politicians, they were just scared of him. And that's the funny part about it. You had
I
grown men who would literally go on camera and kiss butt just in order for him not to, you know, get on him on Twitter. And
I
it's comical.
I agree with you as far as them being scared of him, but as far as him not being a racist, I don't know about that.
No, I think racist is too easy. When it comes to people like him and things of that nature, you have to kind of go a few layers down. And it's easy at the surface to say, okay, he's a racist based on, some things he's spewing out at a rally or whatever. But when you really look at him as a person, he's just weak. And if he felt that Black Americans could get him over the top as far as winning, I guarantee he would have come to us and said all kinds of things to get us to believe like he did that segment of the Republican population.
He did try to do that. He did try to.
No, well, he did, but it didn't work. And so therefore, once he saw that it didn't work, it was kind of he left us to the side. When was the last time you saw some of those Black ministers that have been pushing for him on TV, pushing for him? Once he saw that wasn't going to benefit him any longer, there was no need to have him in the camera anymore. And so therefore, it's just again, he's just weak, and his actions, kind of demonstrate that. His daily actions, his reactions to people on social media, his reactions to folks in an interview, and just the way that he carries himself. And again, it's just good to get him out of office. But I think I posted this on social media too that not everybody should be allowed to become president, and he's a perfect example as to why. Because
qualifications going into it, anyways.
Well,
people just want it.
No one is really. I don't think anyone's ever really ready to be president because if you think about it, you are the most powerful person on the planet.
He's never political. He's never held an office
I think with Biden.
Go ahead, Ken. What? Are you on mute?
I think with Biden getting in there right now, that he's going to start off at least doing some good things because the eye is on him right now. Everyone's looking at him, wondering what's going to happen. Is his leadership going to be good? So I think that he's definitely going to be helpful, at least in the beginning. I'm hoping. I think so. It's going to be interesting. We have Kamala Harris in there, so it just, now we have more diversity where, it looks like everyone in there instead of just white men, basically. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. We'll see what happens. It's going down this week. True,
but at the same token, I don't want us to get in the same position that we did with Barack Obama, where we had all these expectations of, the seas parting and the skies turning from gray to sunshine. While Biden may be the president, he still is confined to what Congress will and won't allow him to do. And while we do control both houses going forward, I just don't think it's going to be as easy as a pathway forward to get a lot of things passed. We'll get some things passed that we've wanted for some time, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as a path as he thinks. And at the same token, I think to kind of heal the nation, I guess you can say, it may be a good idea too to do a lot of things on a bipartisan standpoint. Because again, this I always tell people all the time: the country, while it's far from perfect. It wasn't founded on a single ideology. It was founded on several different types of perspectives. And I think that's the only pathway forward. But if we continue to stay in where, okay, now we control both houses, so we're going to push everything we want. So once the Republicans get in, they're going to shut down everything that we want to do, and they're going to do everything they want to do. We have to get past that, because that's what's gotten the country into the dilemma it's in now from a political standpoint, where nothing's really getting done. And so it's going to take somebody to be the bigger person in the room and say that, while I want this, what do you want too? Let's meet halfway, instead of just kind of shoving everything that you want down somebody else's throat. But anyway, that could be a whole other show topic thing by itself, more than likely. But with that, I know those folks acted up last week as well, Chandra. So with that, as you mentioned, there have been some arrests with regard to those that were participating in the riot at the Capitol, and not enough. It's amazing to me that they were allowed to even walk away from committing a crime of that magnitude. We should have seen people strewn across the National Mall, hog tied with zip ties and everything else, face down by the police. But instead, they were able to go in there, commit those atrocities, and then walk away. And so that to me is just it's funny, but then it's not funny. Because again, if you take that same picture back, early in the summer with the Black Lives Matter movement, you see 5 and 6 rows of National Guard troops, heavily armed, going up the steps to the Capitol. So if it was a BLM rally, they wouldn't have been able to be allowed to even get to the bottom of the stairs. Whereas with this rally, you had security personnel kind of escorting them around the building.
So what is your take on that, being that the president responded different than he did for the protesters, the Black Lives Matter protesters, and his response to the protesters at the Capitol? What is your
bottom line? He deserves whatever he gets. I really wish he would have resigned in shame, because again, once
you don't think played a part in his decision?
Oh yeah, definitely. Race played a huge part in the approach, that the way they approached the BLM stuff earlier in the summer, and then versus what they did on January 6th. That's
right. But I'm saying his lack of the way that he handled the situation. You don't think
he betrayed his office?
What's that?
He betrayed his office. Period. He betrayed the office. When he became president, if you join the military, etc.
Pence and everybody now.
Yeah, you take an oath.
I was surprised to see that.
Exactly. When you become president, though, you take an oath, and that oath means something.
So you don't think that makes him a racist?
No, not at all. It makes him, again, all he's trying to still do is appeal to his base so he can win. That's all he cares about. He can care less if you're purple. If you can help him win, he's going to lean on you and do whatever he can to support you to help so he can win at the end of the day. He can care less what you are. He just, again, he was able to appeal to a certain segment of society, and that segment happened to be Caucasian rural Americans for the most part. And that's what he's able to appeal to get him over the top. If he felt, like I said, he could have done the same thing with African Americans, which he tried. He tried that, but that only got him so far.
He's an opportunist.
Exactly.
He's an opportunist. Wherever's the opportunity at?
And so with that, I think calling him a racist almost gives him, it lets him off easy, because again, it goes a lot deeper, I think, than just somebody calling him a racist. Because again, you have to get to the core of who he is as a person. And if you look at his history, he's just a weak individual. He's never really had to work for anything. And so when he's been a terrible businessman, how he got the reputation of being a great businessman is beyond me when you go bankrupt 4 or 5 times. And how you bankrupt three casinos.
Money
that's laughable. It does, But with that, again, that could be another topic, for a whole other show. But, with the news stories that we're covering today, it's just almost a continuance of coming from 2020 with the pandemic. Now I guess you can call it pandemic, or at least the I guess a domestic pandemic, I guess you can say now, will be this domestic terrorism piece. And we're going to definitely cover that, because I don't think that we've heard the last of it, unfortunately. but we're definitely going to be covering that from a news standpoint going forward. And hopefully everything remains peaceful at the inauguration coming up later this week and across the country. But again, I think that's something that we're going to have to definitely touch on later on because I don't see that going away. These folks are still going to be out there. And hopefully Donald Trump kind of fades into the sunset. I doubt he will, but I wish that
That's
he would. But I think that he's going to still stay
that's
out
to
there
me,
long
that's
enough.
really really
Go ahead,
what
Ken.
got exposed is the people, by really what got exposed is the people, that it's really, it seems like it's 50-50 with racist people and not racist people to me.
Yeah,
And
but
I
if
feel
you're
like
there,
that's
but if
what
you,
really got
but if
exposed
you,
having
but
Trump in office.
it's like this though. If you are
It's just showing
participating,
that how people.
to me, it's like this though. If you were at that rally, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying everybody at that rally was a racist, but if you were there and once everything started going to the left and you stayed, you were just as guilty as those that were there with the Confederate flags and the Auschwitz T-shirts. You're just as bad as them if you stayed there at that time. But with that, we have to go ahead and get into the convo of the day. But again, we're definitely going to be touching on that later on in other shows because again, that's something that I don't believe is going to go away anytime soon, unfortunately. Um, but with that, we're going to get here and touch on our topic of the day, which is a very important one because as of right now, across the country, COVID is still spreading like gangbusters. We thought that we were going to hopefully see some type of a lull in it, but after coming in now after the holiday season, it seems to definitely be spiking in several parts of the country. I believe we're going to hit 500,000 deaths just here in the U.S. Sometime I believe in the next this month or beginning of next month, which is still unbelievable. I still wake up sometime and I can't believe that we are in a world pandemic. This is stuff that we've seen on movies for a number of years, and here it is. This pandemic has basically shut down the world and changed every one of our lives in some form or fashion. So with that, I wanted to kind of open up to the group and ask, the group as individuals, how has COVID affected you with regard to either your profession, your home life, all of the above? How has it affected you? We're going to go ahead and go with Stephanie, if you can, please.
Hi, everyone. So, first, I'll start with professionally. I'm a nurse practitioner at our local hospital here in Gary, Indiana, which was once known as the murder capital of the world. So, just to give you a idea, well, murder capital of the country, of the type of community hospital that we have. So, there, I specialize in internal medicine and pulmonology. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were consulted on every COVID case. So if you can imagine, walking into a hospital in the middle of a pandemic that you pretty much don't know much about. So you don't know if the personal protective equipment you have is going to protect you. You don't know if you're going to take this virus home to your family, to your parents, to your children. You don't know if you're going to survive this.
Mhm.
So the beginning of what we experienced was something like we've never experienced before. I mean, it was a lot of anxiety, a lot of apprehension about going to work. The first several months, we worked months in a row with no off day. Even like right now, I think I've been working 7 weeks straight. I haven't been off since the weekend after Thanksgiving. So, what we deal with in our community, we already have sick patients. We treat primarily mostly African American patients, and they're already sick or they already have a lack of access to health care. So, what we've seen professionally has just been horrific, to say the least. And in terms of home life, I mean, I'm working in the middle of a pandemic and I have kids that are in college. My daughter just was admitted to Howard University. She can't even go on campus because of COVID. So, she's working remotely. um, my younger son is
Wow.
homeschooled, so by grace of God, he's been on autopilot with his work. He's done very well, my daughter too. And even today, just personally, today we buried my boss because of COVID. He was
Oh,
an internist. He worked for almost 40 years in our city. He was my mentor. He was my friend, and he contracted COVID. December 3rd, he tested positive. He was admitted to a university hospital in Chicago. And January 4th, I received the call that he had died.
Oh,
So this not only has impacted us personally or professionally, we as healthcare professionals at the hospital I'm at, we are all grieving. Like, he was a terrible loss to our community. So what we've experienced in healthcare, I mean, I could write a book. You just wouldn't even believe the stories. It's been terrible, really.
How
wow.
is just the I guess for lack of a better, what's the feel like as far as just the do you find that your colleagues are still motivated to really go in there, or are they scared, or what's that like?
So the apprehension and the fear has kind of plateaued, where we trust our personal protective equipment enough that we have more of a fear of catching COVID in everyday life, like going to the grocery store or your kids' friends come over for, to visit and things like that. So I would say the apprehension and the fear is gone. But just as a healthcare provider, I could probably speak for all of us when I say we are exhausted.
I can
Mm.
imagine. I can imagine.
Mhm.
Okay, man.
Well, well, first I want to say thank you for, you guys' hard work and dedication. What would you
Thank you.
say to people who still believe that the virus doesn't exist?
To be honest, I would say they're idiots. Like, when you're living what we are living right now, it's there's no way to say anything else. Like, we've had, for me, I've had patients who were my friends that have
Mm.
died that I've taken care of, and these patients die alone. I had a husband and wife that was admitted. This is just some of the stories. Over time, they were across the hall from each other. The husband ended up in ICU. He ended up dying. So imagine going to tell his wife of 40 years that her husband is dead. And then she ended up dying. I got the call from her daughter 2 weeks ago that she had passed. So we even had a patient come in who thought COVID was a joke, you know, and he almost ended up on a ventilator. He was a Caucasian patient. We ended up saving his life, and he literally spit in our face. He was at the hospital, almost killed him. He wanted to get out of there. He couldn't believe this. He did not believe in COVID. And he treated us so bad. After every person has risked their life to take care of you, we brought you back. Like, we took care of you. And then you told us it's our fault you're here. So there's just been so many stories. I wouldn't even know where to start, actually.
I know you hear so much in the news, and then you see, that it's real. You know that it exists, and I guess for some people, because it hasn't directly affected them, or maybe they don't know anybody, but maybe they know
Hmm.
somebody of somebody of somebody, but then they want to attribute that to, oh, it's an underlying issue. It's not COVID. So,
Hmm.
you know, how does that measure out? I mean, you know that COVID exists. You know that
Hmm.
it. uh, So people are trying to put it off on underlying conditions. How does the two weigh?
So we've had, of course, to say patients that are elderly, that are morbidly obese, that may have uncontrolled diabetes, sleep apnea, underlying diseases like severe asthma, those sort of things. We have seen them do worse as far
Okay.
as their prognosis. However, we have had patients that don't have a significant medical history that have also died.
Okay.
So I had a patient that he was in his 60s. I would still consider that relatively young. And we treated him for COVID for weeks. He ended up testing negative for COVID. His lungs were still killing him. The scar tissue was so heavy that we had to transfer him to a teaching hospital. I can't remember if it was the University of Chicago or what have you, to be on the list for a lung transplant. So
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
even after these patients test negative, there are still residual effects from COVID. Like, this disease knows no bounds. Like, what it has done to patients in terms of blood clots, pulmonary emboli, strokes, just the whole 9 yards. One person I know lost her foot. Like
Wow.
it's just, no bounds when it comes to it, like how it's going to affect you.
Right.
Man. What
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
go ahead, Chandra, I'm
No,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to just basically say from an educational standpoint, Stacy, what have you seen there in San Diego and the schools and whatnot as far as how, because I know to me, the kids, to some extent, don't get me wrong, we have a lot of folks that have, hundreds of thousands that have passed away, but I think that the kids, to some extent, are almost the biggest victims, I guess you can say, because they've been taken out of, their natural routines. They're not around other kids anymore, things of that nature. So from your standpoint, what have you seen just from, in education?
Well, I think that obviously it's a very compounded, issue. I wouldn't necessarily say that kids are the victim because they can't go to school as much as I would say is they maybe have been a victim with regards to the leaders and the adults having let them down in terms of having viable concrete plans that really do plan for plan for them in mind. And I say that because just, when you look at our nation compared to the other countries, how our response to COVID and our reaction was, it wasn't necessarily the best rollout. And so in that regard, I would say that our students and our children might be the victims, but not necessarily because they have to stay home, because that's really outside of all of our out of our control. It's ultimately what's safe. But there have been challenges with regards to distance learning because number one, school was a safe place, even though it wasn't super safe, for people of
Right.
color. But with regards to the camaraderie, like you said, the socializing, and then we know that child reporting, teachers and educators are mandatory reporters. So as an educator, we're trained to kind of like see certain things, discern, and report. So we're not able to do that through Zoom. So we do know that reporting is down for domestic violence and also for child abuse and neglect, but we know those issues haven't necessarily gone away. We know that they're just kind of at home, with each other. Another challenge that we find students engaged in distance learning is the lack of being able to engage. And like the doctor was saying, my kids personally have been doing okay. We did have a struggle at the very beginning getting accustomed to it, but we were able to adapt. But I know a lot of families and a lot of students who are not able to do that. School is hard, for students, let alone their parents. So now we ask parents to help support their students with homework and to do lessons. And a lot of times our parents, in underserved communities didn't necessarily have the best experience or relationship with school themselves. So oftentimes we already have like aversions to school or school leadership or authority. So now, parents are feeling vulnerable, stressed out, overwhelmed with having to take on their own, financial, household, employment responsibilities. And you have children at home who you didn't used to have them at home all day. So a lot of times
Right.
our parents are saying, "Oh my gosh, like take them back. I give respect to the teachers." Like,
But with that said,
like
um,
they're my kids.
right, to you and Mr. Williams, actually, being that you guys are ones in education, given the circumstances, do you feel that the kids should still be held to the same standard with regard to their grades and whatnot, given, the fact that, a good portion of them may have little to no support at home with the whole virtual learning piece? Um, to my knowledge, not all schools or school districts rather have the personnel to where that the teacher can give the students, any decent amount of attention through the virtual piece as far as on an individual basis. So, do you think that they should still be held to the same standard during this time frame with regard to their grades and whatnot?
I personally think that they should be. And here's my problem. because you have their counterparts are stepping up to that standard. And if we tell our kids that you don't have to come up to the same standard, we're getting farther and farther behind. And my concern is that we've got to figure out what we need to do so that we can supplement that. I'm thinking about a school where uh, this group of teachers got together and they called all the grandmothers that were caring for their grandkids. And they said, we know that the school is telling you to keep your kid at home. We want you to send them here. We'll take care of them. So they were doing some creative stuff to say, Grandma, we know you can't handle it because you're not dealing with technology. Let us supplement that. Let us support you. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, yes. And teachers are now doing two. I got a group of kids in school and I got a group of kids at home. And this is tough and it's going to be a struggle. But we've got to talk with the teachers to figure out what they're saying and how they can bring ideas to the table to make it a little bit more easier for them so we don't burn the teachers out. But if we don't hold our kids to the same standard, next year, year after, and we're going to find ourselves so far behind that they're going to be so far at a disadvantage that it's going to be laughable.
So where does that extra help come from? Because again, I understand what you're saying as far as, it's imperative that we hold them to that same standard just so they don't fall behind. But if they don't have that support, they're going to fall behind even further than what they may have been before. So I'm as a, just a true question, where does that support come from? Like what's the remedy to help these kids get through this and at the very least keep them at par to where they were previously, if not hopefully getting some of them ahead, but at least keep them par to where they were previously.
My son teaches in Dallas, and he teaches fourth or fifth grade, and he made a comment that those that when we were in school, those that were doing well are doing well, and those that are not doing what we're not doing well are not doing well in remote. And he was being pushed by his administration to somehow pass those kids on. My challenge that we've got to get with the parents, and the parents have got to check for understanding. And yes, I might not quite understand exactly what you're learning, but I'm going to make you sit down and explain it to me like I'm a child. And then I'm going to connect with the teacher, because when a parent connects with the teacher and says somebody is in this household that is concerned with Johnny, with Michelle, with whoever, that teacher is going to give a better effort. And if that teacher is giving a better effort, that kid is going to be supported and get some better teaching and learning. So I think it starts there. And it's going to be a struggle, but we've got to do something and not say, okay, we're going to skip this grade. Because here's my question. If you had, let's say in 2019, the kids struggled. 2020 came and everybody struggled because we weren't ready. And now if we go into 2021 and we say we're going to give you a pass, that's 3 consecutive years that kid has struggled. How much farther behind is that kid compared to his counterpart?
Right. I gotcha. Yeah, it's just, again, I'm just looking for, I guess, that silver bullet, I guess you can say, this is going to pick these kids up, get them where they need to be, but again, like you said, it starts with the parents.
Asked to, am I on mute?
No question.
Elaborate what Mr. Williams said as far as the families checking for understanding, and you're looking for like this panacea, like this cure-all, this answer that's going to just like, everybody wants to know that answer, but obviously, just like with COVID and any other issue where we're trying to address at a systems level, it's going to be, multi-layered. And so with that regard, what we do know about education is it does take a village. So we can't send our kids to school expecting the school to truly educate and nurture our kids when we ourselves aren't doing that, at home. And so Mr. Williams is right. It's like when, as an educator, you know when a parent shows up, you're not going to mess with that kid. You're going to do everything checks. And unfortunately, the kids who don't have parents, they get kind of left over and they don't get the high level attention and prioritization of the teacher. So even if a parent just at the beginning of the school year, you know, once a semester, reach out to that parent, to the teacher, say, hey, I'm Mr. Jackson. I just want you to know I'm the dad. I'm working with Tyrone. Please, here's my number. Please call me anything, good, bad, or ugly. So that means that takes the responsibility, off of yourself of not being an engaged parent. You have introduced yourself, and now the burden relies of that teacher to reach out to you. But don't leave it there. You definitely want to, keep, if you can't stay in touch with your teacher like that, then you hold your student accountable by, like Mr. Williams said, my mom could not do my homework at Gompers. I
Right.
didn't know that she didn't know she didn't know how to do my work until after I'm in college, because she was literally making me, like he said, explain it to her. And she's like, I don't understand that. And I'll go back again. I had no idea this lady was, working me to make sure, checking for my understanding. And so one of the strategies that we do teach in AVID is how to ask questions. So, I think the schools also have a responsibility to, do our best to engage parents at a higher level, to teach them strategies that they can do at home. So to answer your question, the answer is that the adults have to be working at a higher, level of collaboration on behalf of the students. That's what I would say. Adults, teachers, the community, the neighbors. A lot of people say, complain about what's going on in the schools, but like, honestly, when was the last time you went down to your school and volunteered? You know what I'm saying? Like, Black kids are struggling all the time, and there's always a shortage of mentors. So when was the last time you went down to be that mentor that you had, or, to just contribute, offer some books, show up at lunchtime, anything, so there are ways to help, but we can't just sit around talking about the problems. That's like not cool.
I agree 100%. My daughter's school, for instance, it got to the point where they almost had to tell me to stop calling and asking to volunteer. Because again, for me, I just I love kids, and I want to see those kids succeed. And I want all the kids to succeed, understanding that, not all kids are on the same level, but at the same time, I want all the kids to succeed. I want them to grow up to be the best possible people that they can be. And like you said, I am looking for that silver bullet, even though there isn't one. But I'm looking for it, because again, I want them to win. When I see a child that's struggling, I want to reach out to that child and I want to grab them and what do you need help with? Let's get it done. You know, um, and I just see so many kids struggling now, especially with this pandemic, that it's almost heartbreaking because how long is it going to take for them to recover from this? Will they ever recover from this?
All
You
COVID
know,
did was the gap, whatever gaps already existed, they just exacerbated them. They just opened them way, they're just in our face now. I think
right.
Mr. Williams was going to say something.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Mr.
I
Williams.
want
I
uh,
was gonna say Mr. Wins looked like he wanted to say something.
consider this, and I'll go back to what Stacy was saying. Though mom didn't know the algebra, there's one thing we knew, that we better cross all of our T's and dot all our I's, because when she came up there, she meant business. And
Yeah.
so that if we wanted to taste her wrath, we flipped.
I
We made
gotcha.
Stacy was taken care of. I bring that up to say a parent's influence is without question a benefit to the kid. But here's another thought. I'm looking at those, if we think out the box and say, okay, we have this group of kids that are going to survive, going to succeed regardless of what we do. We have this group of kids that are struggling, and we know they're struggling. What happens if we take our schedule, instead of going every other day on and off, we take those kids that are struggling and insist that they are on campus and allow those that don't need us to go remote? Now we're giving a chance for those kids that are struggling to have somebody in their face, somebody that's giving them that support, someone that's checking for understanding, to keep them moving and at least being close to being caught up with their counterparts.
Agreed, and that's actually a really good idea. And that brings me actually to my next question, and this is for the group as a whole. And I'll need your help on this one, Stephanie, as well, from a medical standpoint. To my knowledge, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest issue or the biggest reasoning rather that's been used as far as kids not being allowed to go to school is due to the fact that um, some may have elderly parents or just elderly family members at home or whatever, and children have been known to be some of the biggest carriers of COVID. They don't necessarily get all of the negative effects of it, but they are the carriers of it. And so, outside of that, why can't kids, or why do you feel as a group or as individuals there that why can't kids be in school now, or can they be, both from a health perspective and from just they need to be there. They definitely do.
Well, I
Not
guess
everybody.
I'll go first. For my kids, we did a few things. So my kids were taken completely out of school. My 6-year-old had the option to go back to school after Christmas break. I signed him up to go back to school, but I wasn't completely sure that that was the right decision. So for me, I ended up pulling him out because I just cannot do it all. So I can't be on the front lines working COVID and making sure he gets to school on time, making sure he gets picked up, making sure his lunch is packed. So with him, he went back the first day. None of his friends were there anyway. And I just decided then, like, this isn't going to work. Like, I can't be at the hospital at 7 a.m. and then you have to be here. And, but what I did do last year was I enrolled him in Kumon, which is, I'm sure the educators know, an educational enrichment program, so that he could not fall behind. Because while I, as a parent, cannot sit there and monitor your homework because I'm charting till 9 o'clock at night, I can't afford to pay to make sure that you're ahead of the curve. So we did that for them. But as far as a healthcare perspective, it is what I see with the patients, the elderly patients that I take care of that are dying from COVID, that are in their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, they're not leaving the house. So it's been the grandchildren and the children that are bringing the COVID home to them. So it is a problem if you have children in the household with our senior citizens or our elderly patients, where you have to think maybe it's not the best idea to put your child in school.
Gotcha. Stacy, Mr. Williams, same question. Like, what are your thoughts on that piece?
Go ahead, Stacy.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
More or less, do you feel, basically stated, do you feel that kids should be back in
Wow.
school from looking at it from both a health perspective and also the educational piece, based on the knowledge that you have on the subject? Do you feel that the kids should be back in school? And with that said, another caveat, what if you don't feel that way at this point, what would it take for you to feel that way for them to go back to school?
Still, let me see here. Let me keep it real. So I think personally that people should have a choice. You know what I mean? I think that we have a gap. I think that our health pandemic is terrible. I think that we've been in a racial pandemic for longer than the health pandemic. And I'm
Definitely.
personally scareder of racism than I am of COVID. And that's just me being real. So I have been like dealing with institutionalized
Uh-oh.
racism at the forefront in this new position, and it's so insulting to my intelligence on behalf of my people for us to say that we're doing things that we're not doing. So whether it's COVID, I think, well, I definitely feel that COVID is taking more of a priority over, like, just say the achievement gap of Black kids, which has been there since forever. So I think that we have to be strategic about how we address one without without being remiss in addressing the other. So I like Mr. Williams' suggestion of students who are, doing well, they can afford to stay home. But our students who are not doing well typically are dealing with issues like generational poverty, being raised by grandparents or working parents who can't afford to pay to supplement or can't afford the pods. So it's like, once again, anytime something happens in America, Black people are going to be hit the hardest. So in education, which was already bad, now it's worse. So so it's almost like the question of small businesses not being able to go back, but you have the big companies who are in business, and then that little funky $600, like, what is a small business owner supposed to do with that? And so it's really a precarious kind of situation, and I think we have to approach it, very empathetically, very open-minded. I think a lot of times people were so self-righteous and we don't want to see the other way, but we can't continue to be that way because we will continue to have haves and have-nots. So I think that the answer, not only people should choose, but I think that we should start prioritizing our people who have less and approaching, solutions with them in mind, because the people at the top, they're going to be all right.
Right.
So that's my answer.
And I think before we can answer that question, we be serious about what the plan is to approach COVID. We don't have a plan that everybody wants to rally around. And I look at the Republicans and I see them without masks, but then I could go on social media and I see a group of African
Say,
American 30-year-old that are at a Bow Wow concert and 3 or 4 people with masks and everybody else, nobody social distancing. And so I'm saying, what are we doing? We know that it's killing us twice as much as everyone else. We know that others are getting the vaccine 2 to 3 times more than us. So we're not wearing a mask. What is the plan? Are we going to continue to play Will COVID and hope that I only lose my taste, as opposed to spinning the wheel and getting a ventilator? We've got to answer that question, and we've got to get people serious about masks and social distancing and taking the vaccine.
And that brings me to my next point, the vaccine. Thank you for bringing that in, Mr. Williams. Um, see,
vaccine.
see the vaccine. I've said, I've been very adamant about this, and I don't say this to try to discourage anyone else or anything or influence anybody else, but this is just my personal belief that in standard, it typically takes, and Stephanie, please correct me if I'm wrong. It typically takes a number of years to develop a vaccine, test it properly, things of that nature. And what that does during that testing is it gives scientists the ability to find out the effects a year down the road, 2, 3 years, et cetera, down the road. Whereas with this particular vaccine, the pandemic hit in January. They started development, I want to say probably around March or April, even though I think they had some type of vaccine they use as a baseline that they had previously. But they basically have put this vaccine together in about less than a year. Understanding the testing that has taken place, you know, from my standpoint, they've been able to test reactions within the first couple of months, first few months. But how do they know what the effects potentially would be a year, 2, 3 years down the road? Or do they even know if we're going to have to take more than two or take it annually, biannually? To me, again, there are too many questions from my standpoint. And I pretty much, personally, again, I'm not trying to influence anybody else. I'm more opting to hold off and see more or less how everything's going to play out. I'll do my social distancing. I wear my mask wherever I go any place. But personally, again, I'm just very apprehensive. So please, I ask the panel, can you please convince me as to why I should do this now?
Well, let me first say, I share in your apprehension because the last conversation that my boss and I had, our last text, our last phone call, even when he was in the hospital fighting for his life, was about the COVID vaccine. So I was apprehensive at first. I was thinking kind of along the lines of what you said, which is, oh, I think I'm going to wait. I'll wait until next fall. I had this conversation with my children. I'll probably wait until next fall and get the vaccine then. And I felt the same way as you. And he and I had a very heartfelt conversation while he was at Northwestern Hospital. And he asked me, had I signed up for the vaccine? And I said, oh no, Dr. Wabar, like I'm going to wait it out. I'm relatively young. I should do okay. And in the years that I've worked with him, he has never talked to me so seriously. And his words were, what I have, you don't want. What I'm going through, you don't want. He was like, I do not agree with your decision to wait. He was like, and as your mentor, as your boss, I have to tell you, I think that's the wrong decision. And that bothered me so much that I started listening to the scientists that have developed the COVID vaccine. I started seeing how my friends and colleagues, people of color, the doctors that I was working with, were being vaccinated regularly. So my apprehension was, what is the long-term effects of this vaccine? Do you get Bell's palsy? Is it going to cause weakness? Is it going to cause these headaches that we hear about? And Dr. Wabar and I, my mentor that has passed, our conversation was the likelihood of those things happening to you is so low in comparison to what we experience every day, in comparison to seeing patients that are not coming off of ventilators, in comparison to seeing patients that are now developing strokes and clots and brain fog and memory loss and psychosis. So I really had to sit down and think, what's the greater risk? So for me, the greater risk was getting COVID. Like, could I guarantee I was going to walk out of that hospital? Could I guarantee my 5 children were going to have a mother? Was I going to survive that? So I had to really think about the fact I can live with Bell's palsy. I can live with a headache. I can live with generalized weakness. I cannot risk losing my life to COVID. And then I have 5 people that depend on me solely. So that's what I thought about. And then with my boss losing his life to this, he was 2 weeks shy of being vaccinated, something that would have saved his life. So what happens, and this was our conversation also, is if you delay, what if you lose your seat to get vaccinated? What if we run out of vaccines? So that was the issue also. And when I looked at the scientists who developed the vaccine, Dr. Corbett, who's an African American woman, and Dr. Graham, who's her director, and I listened to them discuss the vaccine, they said what I already knew, which was coronavirus did not just get here. It's been around. They've been studying this for 20 years. So they knew that a pandemic was going to come eventually. They knew it was imminent. So they had already been studying these things. So for me, I just chose to trust science and trust my colleagues, people who look like me, who are developing these things, who are developing these vaccines, who are being vaccinated at my hospital. I just had to choose that because when you look at the long-term effects of COVID, including death, it's worse than I might get Bell's palsy or I might have weakness or headaches from COVID. It's just the risk of the long-term effects of COVID is worse.
Understood. Now, with that said, you mentioned something there. I've heard that too, where they said that they've been working on this for 20 years plus, but wasn't SARS a form of coronavirus as well?
So they've been studying coronaviruses for 20 years,
Okay.
at least from what I heard of them talking, and I've watched several of their conversations. So that's how they were able to develop, I think it was the spike protein from coronaviruses for your body to recognize it. So the thing that made me most comfortable about the COVID vaccine, and I've received my first vaccine, I get my second one tomorrow, is that it's not COVID virus. So it can't give you COVID like the original flu vaccines that were
Right.
originally live virus and made everybody sick. So it can't do that. So that made me comfortable. And the fact that with this, I just have to trust science on this because I don't want COVID. I don't want my parents to get it, from being exposed to me or my children. So that's where I'm at with it.
I got you. And I know,
So,
Stacey, I believe you recently got it too, didn't you? The vaccine or no?
Stacey's brother in the room. You know, I
well,
um I did not get the COVID
Okay.
vaccine. I don't um get shots. I don't take the flu shot. I don't take medicine. I don't take pills. I drink alkaline water and fruits and vegetables, and I work out and I pray and I meditate. And now that's not to say that that's not precluding me from anything. I just try to keep a nice, good temple. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, if and when I'm led to do anything beyond what I'm doing with medicine, then I will. I kind of don't trust medicine like I don't trust the school system. You know what I'm saying? It's like we're all American. You know what I'm saying? Like I have like cognitive dissonance daily, even in my role, as a public school administrator, knowing that I know that the system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. I personally have distrust, great levels of distrust. I won't even say apprehension. It's just straight up, I don't trust because of what I've seen happen to our people. If it happened in the past, it likely to repeat itself in the future. I don't want to make people feel bad or judge people for their decisions, and nor do I want to be judged or felt bad about mine because it's like we all have our one good life. We all have to be accountable to our family and our responsibilities, but um I I don't plan on it.
Gotcha. I will say this.
let me
Stephanie
let
got me
me
thinking. Go ahead,
let me
Chandra.
let me ask her a question. With the new strain of the virus, with it mutating, how does that affect the vaccine? Does the vaccine will that make it? How will the vaccine respond to the new strain that's supposed to be coming in March?
So the talks that I have heard from Dr. Corbett and Dr. Graham that I've listened to, the panels that they've been a part of, they said they do not think this vaccine for this COVID-19 will protect you against another strand of COVID. It's not expected to. And when I heard that there was another strand of COVID, I'm I'm like, I definitely had to get vaccinated because catch one strand, which is awful. We don't even know what the second strand is going to even look like. So they did say in the panel discussions that they've had, it's not expected to protect you from any mutated versions of COVID.
So we'll have to wait until they come up with another vaccine.
That's what it looks like. But they also said that the development of this vaccine and how they rolled it out will have them better prepared if they have to develop yet another vaccine for a different strand of the virus.
So with that, I'm just going to piggyback on that really quickly. So with that said, because again, viruses especially, they mutate constantly. Is it feasible that we could have 5 or 7 different vaccines at the end of the day?
I don't know. I guess it just depends on how many different strands of COVID come out because,
Right.
I get the apprehension against our community. I completely get it. So even with my boss being at a primarily white university hospital when he was treated, I have apprehension about that. He was Nigerian, he was African, so when he died, I'm sitting there thinking, did they treat him right? Did they give him everything? Did they know who he was in the community? Did they just see him as a black man or another COVID patient? So I get the mistrust that there is surrounding the vaccine in healthcare. I see that every day. I see how my patients have been seeing other doctors that have not taken care of them. Like, so it's the mistrust for healthcare, the mistrust in society. It's there. It's a reason to feel that way. So I understand it completely.
Gotcha. Mr. Williams, what are your
I'd
thoughts on
like to
that?
get your
Go ahead, DJ. I'm sorry.
well, real quick for Stephanie. I wanted to know your take with these face masks that we're wearing. Do you feel like they're helping? Are they doing anything? What's your take with the face mask?
Oh yeah. I don't use the little cute mask with all the diamonds and the studs and the fabric. I do believe in using
Right.
a hospital approved mask. So at least a level 2 or a level 3. Like, I don't care if I look crazy walking in a room, I'm going to have on a mask that protects me. So I think they do work. The clinic that I work in, everyone has had COVID except for about 3 of us, including me. And I wear a mask all the time. Like, I wash my hands. I don't touch the gas pump. I wear rubber gloves to pump my gas. Like, somewhere I heard if you wash your hands 20 times a day, you're likely to not get COVID. So shoot, I wash my hands 20 times a day. Like, all the protective measures help. Like, the mask helps. The
Wow.
gloves help. I mean, not the gloves, the mask, the hand washing, the social distancing. All of that stuff works.
Does anyone on the panel who on the panel rather goes
Do you
out
feel like
have been out to restaurants? Go ahead, Ken. I'm sorry.
no, go
Well,
ahead. Finish
No,
it.
no. My question was, who on the panel still goes out to sit down restaurant, or who has or goes
I
on a
do.
regular basis?
before we scoot on, I'm sorry, I know this is not my show, but I wanted to hear what
You
Mr.
good?
Williams said about the his vaccination.
Oh, please.
What the slide out and like that? What do they do that at?
know a lot of folks are saying no thing. Whether you say yes or no to the vaccine, my point is have a plan. Stacy has a plan and she's going to work that alkaline water and that's her plan. The mass, what our problem is, we tend to start with a plan and then we get lax. And when we get lax, COVID forces to get lax. And so what I'm saying is have your plan. I'm an old man and I want to see my grandbaby graduate. And so she's 3 and I'm old. So I'm going to get the vaccine. I have not gotten the flu vaccine. I've been opposed to it. But this is a different situation for me. When we have 30 minutes, somebody dying, this is not something to joke around with. And so I stress the point. I go back to Mike Tyson when he says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I don't think we have a plan. And if we do have a plan, I don't think we're serious about following that plan. I am going to be religious on making sure I have that mask on, that I keep social distance what I can, and I wash my hands. That's my plan. But then I'm going to add to the plan. That's all I'm saying. Whatever you're going to do,
Wow. Well, I'll definitely say before this show, I was like, I am not getting the vaccine. But listening to you guys, I'm starting to change my thoughts.
That's why I'm here. One person changed their mind. It's worth it. One person.
Gotcha. So with that, go take back my previous question. How many of you guys are still going out to on a regular basis rather than restaurants, sit down restaurants?
I go to restaurants.
Well, they closed that
Anybody else?
down here in San Diego, but I try.
Gotcha. Yeah, we go about 2, 3 times a week probably on average, and we try to go to the same restaurants. We have a couple of regular places that we go to, those that practice the social distancing and,
Hmm.
the only part that I usually kind of look around the room in when I'm in the restaurant is when you take your mask off, you have to drink your water, you have to, drink whatever wine or whatever you're doing. And so with that, that's my only, I guess, question mark about eating at a restaurant. But for me, it's almost like it's an outlet, because we've
Hmm.
been confined, for basically a year now. And when we go to that restaurant, it's like a field trip. We go to the same restaurants, we're going out, you're seeing other people, you're hearing conversations going on around you or whatever, but it's basically turned into a field trip. To me, a field trip is going to Kroger nowadays too. So that's the exciting part of the day, going to Kroger. That's funny. But with that, again, we just all have to, like Mr. Williams said, you have to have a plan. At the end of this discussion, that's what I want. That's what I would hope that people take away with this, is that you have a plan. Whether you're getting the vaccination or not, whether you're doing your social distancing, where you're wearing gloves, whatever the case, have a plan, because this isn't a joke. I've had a coworker pass away from it. She and her husband passed away the same week, and they had a 17-year-old son. I had another coworker whose sister passed away, I want to say a week before last, from COVID. My mother's lost several friends. And so with that, it's serious. It's no joke. This isn't some government conspiracy. It isn't something this is serious. People are dying. And those that live after having COVID, as Stephanie mentioned, they have things, lingering effects that are going to stay with them probably for the rest of their lives, whether it be lung damage, whatever. And so I would say that people who see this podcast, rather, encourage your friends. If they're not getting the vaccine, again, have a plan. What are you doing to prevent yourself from getting COVID? What are you doing to prevent others from getting COVID around you? What are you doing? And really stress that, because it's no joke. It's still here. It's going to be here for the foreseeable future, at least through 21, I'm thinking, at least through 2021. And so with that, we have to be serious about it, because we have to slow the spread. Georgia's wide open. We never really shut down. I think for about a month we might have shut down. Excuse me. So we're pretty much wide open. I know California's shut down to some extent, but for places like here in Georgia, where we're wide open, we have to kind of discipline ourselves and say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it, because our government here isn't doing it for us. They're not putting any framework out there for us to do it. And so we all have to be responsible for ourselves and for our families and for our friends, and spread the good news and say, hey, this is what you need to do if you're not doing it. Call your people out. If you see somebody not doing it that you care about, check them on it, seriously, because this is no joke. This is not something you want to be quiet about or keep it to yourself, or I'm just going to let this one go this time. No, because that time that person goes out to the store without a mask can be that time they get COVID. Excuse me. All it takes is that one time. And so that's one thing, again, that I hope that people take away from this is, again, I'm going to use Mr. Williams' thing again, have a plan. We have to do that. I think this has been a great discussion. But before we get off, I don't want us to leave, because this is Martin Luther King Day. And with that, I want us, if you can, please, if you don't mind, if each of you can let me know what this day means to you guys. And we can start with Stacy, if you don't mind. Put you on the spot.
You sure did, because I would like to say this day for me is, I don't know, I feel like every year we come back to this place and we've accomplished much as a nation, but we have so much further to go. And I almost feel like the more we accomplish, the more we realize that we do have so much further to go. So I don't know, lately I've been triggered and I've had to do a lot of work in recalibrating and refocusing and mastering my energy, because I feel like I've been letting things kind of get to me. And when I think about being an effective leader, I think about Dr. King, I think about my mentor, Ambassador Andrew Young, I think about Jesus and Barack Obama, how they were just real smooth, real get it out. Now I look at Kamala and like how we deal with, our oppressors. And ultimately, Jesus was about love. And I'm so gangster sometimes I forget that. And I say that like in Dr. Mr. Williams, you know what I'm talking about. It's so like temper, and modify my moves. Otherwise, it's like I forfeit the mission. So for me, this day is about recalibrating and being smart and being intentional, and just staying on my mark so I don't like forfeit. That's what today is. That's where I'm at.
I got you, Stephanie.
Today, I think when I think about the legacy of Dr. King, I think that he accomplished so much in his life, even though it was cut short tragically. I think that everything he did was for us to have a seat at the table today. And I feel that we do. We have a far ways to go, but I feel like his life and legacy has provided so much for people of color. Just the fact that we've had an African American president, we have the first female vice president, and she's an African American president from an HBCU. I feel that the fact that even with the COVID vaccine, we have an African American immunologist that developed that. That's all because of the life that he led and what he wanted for us as a people. So I think that this day is special. He did all that he did for us to be here, and I think that in terms of his life to live out his legacy, what I tell my children, which is take your education as far as you can take it. Make your life meaningful. Be great at what you do. Make a difference in the world. And I think that carries out his legacy.
Miss Chandra?
Um, I would have to agree with both of the ladies. Just recognizing the blood, sweat, and tears that he put in his life, that he put on the line for us to have a seat at the table. And, like Stephanie said, and I forgot, what was your name?
Stacy.
Stacy. For us, especially Black women, this past year has been a year for Black women holding very important positions in the government. And so, it just means that, he took so many steps forward for us, but we still have a long ways to go. It's just a reminder that we still have to continue to fight for what his legacy stood for.
Gotcha. Mr. Williams?
When I look at the day, when I look at the man, my challenge now, because with him, he showed us where the wound was. But as America, we continue to put a Band-Aid on that wound. And what I've decided is I'm going to continue to say, no, you can't put a Band-Aid on that. We've got to address it. But I'm going to say it in a way that it doesn't offend those that I'm talking to and kind of pulls them towards me to address those concerns.
Okay. DJ Majesty? You there, Ken? He's frozen? Okay. Well, I'll take his spot, I guess you can say. From my standpoint, it's a bit of a mixed.
I feel
Go
like
ahead. I'm sorry. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
You
Go
guys
ahead.
hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Okay.
You can hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Just briefly, I feel like it just showed that how much one person can do. Everyone has greatness inside of them. My bad. Have greatness inside of them. One man. So we can really do whatever we believe that we can do. So it just shows us for me personally, to be as much as a leader as I possibly can be, and it show another is just the platform. Like that's why we have this here. The life of people is something where people can get information, because that's the thing. If you get information, applied knowledge is where the power is at. So you get the information and you have to you apply it so massively.
Agreed. From my standpoint, it's a bit of a mixed piece. I think of it as like today I was watching TV and a commercial came on about MLK, and then I go on social media.
I'll turn it to you guys.
Okay. I saw a commercial come on about MLK, and then I see it go on social media, and I see a lot of posts about MLK, etc. And it's almost like I won't say a fad, but it's almost like people do it on MLK Day, and you don't hear anything else about Martin Luther King for the remainder of the year. And I'm not going to say that people don't go out and practice what MLK taught us on a yearly basis every day. But I'm thinking that what we need to do is start celebrating him and implementing more of what he taught or tried to teach us in our more of our everyday life. And I think if we did that, I think we'd be better off, not only as a nation as a whole, but just as our own community. Um, I think that one thing that I take away from what MLK taught was self responsibility, being accountable for yourself and for your actions, um, and holding others accountable around you. And those are two things that I try to do in my everyday, working in corporate America, et cetera, is be accountable for what I do and what I can do. And then also too, like I said, holding others accountable for what they're supposed to do. But this day will always be special because again, as you mentioned earlier, that we've come a long way, but we still have a whole long way to go. We still have law enforcement shooting us down like it's nothing. We still have a criminal justice system that's geared against us. And with that, again, that's going to be a topic of a whole other show. But with that said, we have a long way to go. But I think it's going to start with us and not looking to the government, not looking to anybody else, but again, taking a lot of what MLK said about self responsibility and each of us looking in the mirror and holding ourselves responsible on a daily basis as to how we're going to conduct ourselves during the course of any given day and how we're going to interact with others. Are we going to bring negativity to any given situation, or are we going to bring positive? Are we going to put positive out there in the world? Somebody asked me one day, and I'm going kind of long here really quickly, but somebody asked me one time that, or made a comment that they don't ever see me post anything negative on social media. And I do that intentionally. There's a whole lot of stuff that I see that's really crazy that I love to post, but I don't because there's enough, excuse the expression, BS and craziness out there. And again, that goes back to MLK is, you put positivity out into the world, you're going to get that back. But if you put a bunch of stuff out there, that's what's going to come back to you. Go ahead, Stacey. I see you want to say something.
Yeah, because we keep, you know, Dr. King was not like this celebrated person when he was alive. Like he was a felon, he was a lawbreaker, he was a socialist. Like he was pushing the line. He was the king of shutting things down. You know what I mean? So like we're all like,
Right.
oh yes, he was this and he was that. Like America did not even like him. Like we killed him. So it's like
Mm,
easy for us to say, oh, yes, be like Dr. King. They don't want us to be like Dr. King. So we got to
right.
be telling the truth about this man's legacy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't want to get open it back up
No,
and get triggered. You know
no,
what I'm
you,
saying?
no,
But
you're
we
good. But
like
you're,
he
you're
was not like just all skating on ice,
no, he was a man. He
No,
was a
he
man.
was
He had faults.
like he was gangster for God and his black
Yeah,
people. He spoke truth to power. He was very eloquent. You know what I mean? And he was like public enemy number one. The white folks was not fooling with Dr. King. Like they fooling with him now because he's gone. And like all the oppressors are like, oh, Dr. King,
right.
calling
Agreed.
we're okay. So I just want us to be like what he was encouraging us to do. He was encouraging us to be black AF. That's what he was encouraging us to do. Okay.
Agreed 100%. Agreed
Right
100%.
on. Right on, Stacy. Got it right
I
this time.
agreed 100% on
That's
that
that
one.
Spelman in Clark Atlanta. That's that HBCU talking.
Excellent, excellent. So with that, we want to thank you guys for joining. I think this is an excellent, excellent discussion. Thank you to our guests, Stacy Dent, Stephanie, Mr. Williams. I can't believe I'm 44 and I still call you Mr. Williams. Um, but that's this tremendous amount of respect that I think that we all have for you, which is why we do it. Love and respect that we've had for you had an effect on each of us in our own respective ways. Like I said, you saved me on a number of occasions. But with that, we thank you. You guys have made this a wonderful, wonderful show. And we look forward to having you guys, with your blessings on future shows. Then it won't be on COVID, of course, but on various topics that we feel that you guys would definitely be good participants on. But again, we thank you. We look forward to doing many, many more of these and making this grow. We have a great team, Miss Chandra, DJ Majesty. We're here to make this grow. And again, we thank you guys. And we look forward to, again, working with you guys again in the future. Please spread the word about the show because, again, we're looking to grow this on a weekly basis. And I thank you. Everybody stay safe. Remember what was said on the show. Practice your social distancing. Have a plan. in the words of Mr. Williams. And be safe. And God bless everybody. And thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.